Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I am here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Is the federal government about to propose a home equity tax? The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has recently researched this topic. How does that square with the increasing challenges facing Canadians in obtaining their dreams of affordable housing ownership? We're pleased to have returning to Boom and Bust, Tim Hudak. He's the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association to discuss this bombshell. Welcome back, Tim.
Thanks for being back on Boom and Bust, Tony. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Well, maybe just describe for our audience what you know about this recent CMHC study.
Well, it was a bombshell. That's a great analogy to use. Basically, it's a proposed new tax that will be like a bomb on the savings of Canada's middle class. They basically want to put a tax on your home, Tony, that you would pay every year to the federal government, or you could wait until you sell the property. But as you know, our homes are our greatest asset. It's a place of comfort, security. It's a place of fondest family memories. But most people rely on their home to help provide for their retirement. And this would be like a nuclear bomb on the savings for retirement of middle-class Canadians. It should be a non-starter, and the government should walk away altogether.
Where did this come from? I understand CMHC was doing the research with a Canadian university.
Basically, through a group called Generation Squeeze. And Generation Squeeze, at its core, through University of British Columbia professor, is trying to find ways to help the next generation in the housing market. We share that goal at the Ontario Real Estate Association. Nothing would make a realtor happier than handing over the keys to a new home to that young millennial couple that's expecting their first kid. Mm-hmm. But the last way you want to do that is to tax other homeowners. You can't tax your way to affordability. So where did this come from? Well, the CMHC had a fund to study housing market solutions. I believe it was $250,000 they gave to Generation Squeeze, but they came up with this awful idea. And look, Tony, the CMHC plays an important role in Canadian housing markets. As you know from your political experience, it started out as an agency to help returning World War II veterans own a home in return for their service to our country. It should stick to its knitting, look out for housing affordability and supply, and stop the political activism.
We are going to talk about some wider issues in a sec, but I just, again, trying to make sure our audience knows why this is so alarming. What could be the potential financial impacts of a home equity tax?
Geez, billions of dollars. And we worry about it at the Ontario Real Estate Association because when governments spend, as they have done during this pandemic, their next instinct is always tax, tax, tax. And we do worry that politicians will see the value of your home as a big, juicy target to squeeze more money. Here's the problem. You already pay a lot of taxes on your home. I mean, when you buy your home, you pay taxes. There's a land transfer tax that's doubled in the city of Toronto. And then, Tony, can you think of another product that you or your family own where you pay an additional tax every year, like the property tax?
Right.
So the notion that someone would put another tax on that, which would be a wealth tax, when you sell your house, you'd have to pay an additional tax on your property or an additional property tax year after year, is a terrible idea. It undermines savings, and it really breaks the promise we have to Canadian homeowners that can count on their home in their retirement to finance their golden years or to pass on to their kids or grandkids.
Yeah, and I guess the other part of this is there's a kind of presumption that the equity in one's home is going to keep going up and up because that's what's been happening over the last few years. But that may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, that's fairly true as well. You shouldn't base a taxation system on a product that can go up and down in value. We've been on a good run recently. It doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. But also think of this. These are after-tax dollars. So,
right.
If Debbie and I put money aside from the home, we've already paid taxes on it. We pay a tax when we buy our home. We pay a tax on our home year after year. And then another tax when we try to sell it. Tony, that's outrageous. And it's an attack on the social fabric of Canada's middle class that do count their homes as the most proven investment probably in their entire portfolio.
We're going to continue our discussion with Tim Hudak. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Real Estate Association, and lots of topics to discuss because we are discussing housing affordability, not only just this home equity tax, but also other aspects of housing affordability. So please stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tim Hudak. He is the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Tim, we talked a little bit in the first segment about this home equity tax. You must be monitoring the response to this idea, not only your association's response, but generally, what's been the response to this idea?
So the Trudeau government denies that they have any plan to bring in this tax, but there's that old expression, Tony, where there's smoke, there's fire. On many occasions, this idea has been floated as a trial balloon. Sometimes they say, well, it'll only be houses $1 million or over, although there are a lot of middle-class homes in our major cities at that level. But you know as well as I do that government over time will expand that to everyone. And we really don't like the idea of a government agency whose purpose should be focusing on affordability and supply in the marketplace, funding this kind of political activism. So here's where they should be focusing. They should be working with provinces and municipalities to increase housing supply, to bring in more starter homes for that first-time family, or move-up homes when the kids come along and you want a bit more space. We have a huge lack of supply, whether you're in Niagara, Toronto, or any part of our province. You could also look at using surplus government land or buildings that are already in existence, convert them into housing. We anticipate seeing a lot of excess commercial real estate as well as people, work from home more or do more shopping online. Why not make it easier to combine them into mixed-use residential and commercial? There's lots of ideas to help out with affordability by increasing choice and supply in the marketplace. But putting a brand new tax, that's not going to make situations better. It'll actually make things worse.
What are the impediments to some of these ideas coming forward, Tim? Are they local impediments, provincial or federal? Give us an idea.
Yeah, two things: courage and guts. Really, right? There are solutions on the table. Let me give you an example that would be relevant to a lot of our major centers. So picture that wartime bungalow, whether you're in Brampton, you're in St. Catharines, you're in Ottawa or Toronto, and it's got a lot of wear and tear. So a person could buy that home, and right now they could tear it down and build a 4-story monster home. That's their right. We support that. They own the property. But Tony, if they wanted to convert that property into maybe a duplex, so 2 families could live in it, or 3 or 4 units, or build it up and rent out part, providing affordable housing choices, they go through this regulatory ringer that costs time, costs money, and then they throw up their hands and walk away. And who pays the price? Well, it's those 3 or 4 families that can't find a place to stay. So we call it exclusionary zoning. It excludes new neighbors from moving into neighborhoods at affordable rates. In our big municipalities, that's a piece of archaic red tape standing in the way. We think we should tear that down and give the homeowner the choice. They want to improve the size of their own home, great. But they want to put more units on for more families in the neighborhood, they should be allowed that too.
Yeah, I suspect that part of the issue is, what's been called the NIMBY attitude, that adjacent homeowners are afraid that that'll have an impact on their own value of their own home if somehow the neighborhood is diversified. Is that part of the issue?
Yeah, it tends actually to improve property values because the value of your home increases. But I think you nail it there, though, Tony. It's kind of a bit of a snob zoning that we don't want people that may not be living in this neighborhood currently to move in. And we think that's very unfortunate because we have an increasing demand, whether it's millennials or new Canadians who are moving in, people who got a job and now can afford a home, should be given every opportunity that current homeowners have to get into the marketplace. It also has significant economic benefits. The reality that you've seen in your current politics is that municipal councillors will often be more interested in current voters and therefore get on side with the NIMBYism and stop projects as opposed to who's going to move into their ward. So we need to realign the incentives. So here's an example. The province of Ontario should look at municipalities that are actually providing more housing that people can afford and reward them with infrastructure dollars, transit, roads, water, and sewer. So have some carrots to go along with it to align incentives focused on helping more people get a great place to call home.
Yeah, and we're going to return to this after the break, but we got about 30 seconds left here. really, if you don't have those things, basically you're kind of condemning your kids and your grandkids to not having affordable home ownership.
And that's the reality. The NIMBY forces have become so powerful that we actually have fewer homes in Ontario today than any other province per capita. Yeah. And we're last among G7 nations when it comes to providing housing. So no wonder rates are going through the roof.
We're going to continue our discussion with Tim Hudak. He is the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, talking about housing affordability and what can be done about it. Please stay with us after the break. Tim, you mentioned kind of the CMHC sticking to its knitting a little bit. Go into that in a little bit more detail. Tell us what they should be doing versus where they've veered off, perhaps.
Yeah, so in a couple ways. The CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, has a proud history. It's been a strength in Canada in helping aspiring middle-class people get into the home ownership market. I mentioned earlier how they helped World War II veterans, for example, and now they're looking at ways of helping more entrepreneurs who have risk in their jobs and have a steady payroll get housing as well. So here's two areas that they should really be focusing on: working with the provinces and municipalities to incent more home development in areas that people can't afford. For example, and help securing financing for purpose-built rentals, or help secure financing for duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, the kind of entry-level housing that we have a lack of across our province. The second area that CMHC can be very helpful is financing mechanisms that recognize modern alternatives. So let me explain. Traditionally, most of us would have gone to a bank or credit union to get a mortgage. We're single owners of a home. There are now possibilities using financial technology to have other investors in your home. Maybe it's a friend, it's a roommate, you both own the home. Or what's often happening is more patient money locked up in pensions, for example, or investors will co-own your home, and you pay them off over time by paying them a bit more as if it were rent. Or Tony, when you sell your house, they get part of the upside. These are modern models that can help people get into the marketplace, because getting that down payment is usually more expensive and difficult than getting the mortgage. But our rules built in the 1970s and 1980s really exclude these new financing options. Let's modernize and help more people get into the market.
But you're not talking about, say, like the derivatives that were created before 2008, where basically they were mortgage-backed securities that people really didn't have an idea I'm talking in the United States now. They didn't really have any idea what they really were. But you're not talking about that.
No, nothing of that nature. And we do take, largely much more small C conservative approach, as you know, to housing financing in Canada. That is a strength of ours because we didn't get hit the same way as Americans did in 2008, 2009. But let me give you an example of what has worked in other countries like the UK. So my wife, Debbie, and I wanted to buy a home. We can make the mortgage payments with our combined incomes, but getting that down payment is increasingly tricky. So we can go to a financing app supported by a pension. We would pay 80% of the price of the down payment. They would pay 20%. Effectively, they would own 20% of our home, and we could pay them off over time, so we own it 100%. Or when we sell the house, we get 80% of the benefits and they get 20%. It's a very sensible model that can actually work and help people get into the market with that down payment. But we have outdated rules when it comes to mortgage financing or provincial laws that stand in the way to a very reasonable and modern approach.
Very interesting. So do you know of any provinces in Canada that are starting to reform this kind of financing or accessibility to home ownership?
Yeah, and BC is ahead of us. So they've begun this. It's quite common in the US and the UK. But there is positive news here. I want to commend Premier Ford and particularly the Housing Minister, Steve Clark. They brought in legislation called the More Homes, More Choice Act. We were happy because they took 8 of 10 of our recommendations. So that's kind of an A where we'd like to see that. But it made the biggest difference probably in several generations, Tony, in increasing housing supply. We had a record number of new homes built in 2020, for example, than the previous 2 decades. So that's a very good start. And they are also looking at provincial legislation and regulations that stand in the way to those new financing tools I mentioned, we hope to hear more about that in the time ahead, but they're very interested in tearing away that red tape.
And they seem to be using, unless I'm mistaken, tools like the municipal zoning orders to make sure that municipalities are not an impediment to home building. Is that right?
Yeah, and they should do more of that. So a municipal zoning order is a power that's existed for some time for municipal affairs ministry. You were in that position, if I recall,
Yep.
some time ago, that allows them to override some of the conflicting, local rules, regulations, and all the different agencies, boards, and commissions you have to do business with that delay projects and drive up costs. Effectively, the province has done this for housing that are housing projects that have affordable housing as part of that, or for job creation centers. Has enabled projects that would normally take several years to happen much more quickly. But honest to goodness, Tony, when you hear that a subdivision in Ontario today can take up to 10 years to get a project approved in the city of Toronto for even a couple of homes of 2 years, every month of delay drives up costs even more and means that home is further from the fingertips of a hardworking middle-class Ontario family.
We're going to conclude our discussion with Tim Hudak after the break. Please stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tim Hudak. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Tim, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a different course here for this segment a little bit. I'm really curious whether you're noticing in your role more of a organized pushback on home ownership. Like, is there an anti-home ownership kind of lobbying group now that you're having to contend with?
Oh, absolutely. There are, I think, for a couple of reasons. Generation squeeze, like you talked about in the first segment, have been pushing against homes having a return for your retirement to try to make them equal with rental housing. We think people should be rewarded for investing in their home and their property. So there are definitely folks who, I think many of them, comfortable in their own homes, but they don't care too much if your son or daughter gets a place of their own, who are pushing away from home ownership, who think we should be more like, I guess, Paris, France, where it's harder to own a home, or for ideological reasons, they think there is something wrong with it. We take a very different view at the Ontario Real Estate Association. The fact that that when you buy a home, I think when Debbie and I bought our first home in 2002, we cared more about it. We cared more about our neighbors. We cared more about our community. We invested in that home. We got more involved as volunteers. Home ownership really reinforces the strong Canadian fabric. It builds stronger neighborhoods and communities. And study after study has demonstrated that the children of homeowners, whatever the income level, tend to do better in school, have better health outcomes, and get better jobs. A home can also be an important source of savings to help build or expand your own business. There are many benefits to that, and that's why governments for a long time have supported home ownership as an important principle in Canada's culture. And that has meant that whether it's Depression, World War I, the 1970s, the 80s, every year you had a better shot at owning a home than your parents or grandparents. Homeownership continued to increase until 2012. And now we started going backwards. So some of these groups say, let's give up on that. Let's try something else. We believe there are a lot of opportunities to increase homeownership and to make sure that this next generation, Tony, can get in a home just like their parents or grandparents that they can afford.
Is it part of your role to try to, or is there a need for somebody, if not the Ontario Real Estate Association, and somebody to educate, not talking about millennials now, even Generation Zers, that there is a value in home ownership? Is that part of the struggle here?
I think you're right about that, and I can see your perspective reflecting all your time in public life. There really was no voice for homeowners or people who aspire to be homeowners. Mm-hmm. So the last number of years, Ontario Realtors have decided to be that voice because they're acting every day in the streets of our provinces, trying to help buyers and sellers, prepare for their future, make the right decisions for their family. So we try to act as that voice to say why homeownership matters to our communities, why it matters to Canadian culture, and why it's a long-term smart investment. The returns are proven, and after all, you can't raise a family inside a stock or a bond. It is a place of our most precious memories. But good thing we did, Tony, because we are now fighting back against sort of a new wave of activists who do not believe in home ownership, who are pushing back against creating more homes in our province. The good news is that we do our polling, well over 80% of Ontarians want to see more homes, more opportunity. They want to see their sons and daughters who worked hard, got their degree, got a good job, find a place to call home.
And I bet you with our new Canadians, newcomers, it's the same, right?
May have been the case with your family, right? If I recall,
Right.
in the Niagara Falls area, when my parents emigrated from what was then Czechoslovakia, their Slovak background, the first thing they did was they saved every buck they had, Tony, to buy a home. And they rented out the upstairs so they could bring some income into the house and pay down the mortgage. They believed it was the best place to raise their family and a smart investment. That culture remains true with new Canadians today. Among our polling, they rank among the highest that wants to the Canadian and the Ontario government's focus on more housing they can afford, as opposed to going down the path of the activists in the opposite direction.
Tim Hudak, that's all the time we have, but thank you for joining us today. Very instructive broadcast. We hope to have you back soon.
My pleasure, Tony. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. I want to thank Tim Hudak again. Very interesting conversation about home ownership, what it means for our society, what it means for our kids and our grandkids too. So thanks for watching that. We'll continue to track this very important story. Thank you again.